It's been a minute since I talked to MPP Bobbi Ann Brady, but it's nice to have her back. It's, it's late August. September's coming. Kids are going back to school. I saw you did your summer tour. How'd that go? I want to ask about that. I saw you're doing different meetings and having some fun
Yeah,
with that as well.
it was great. We have one more stop to make, I think. I think it's tomorrow. Anyway, yeah, I want to thank all of the locations. I know in Port Over it was Coco Cabana. We were at the Minga in Dunville. We were at Carolinian and the bakery in Cayuga. Um, yeah, it was good. And Country Fork in Port Rowan was one of the stops as well. And some people ask me, they're like, "Oh, well, why are you doing this?" And the reason we do it, and I've been doing it since 2022, the reason we do that is because not everybody can make it into Simcoe to meet with me. They might have, they may not have access to a car, or they may not just want to travel that far to meet if they live in Dunville or they live in Caledonia. Um, so, we do. Revival Coffee was also a stop in Caledonia, so I want to give them a plug. Yeah, so we go out into the community so people have an option that they don't have to drive. There were a few people who said, "Oh, well, yeah, I want that meeting, but why are we meeting in this location?" They didn't really understand that if they had something very highly confidential, that may not be, the thing for them, that they should probably come into my office for that. But every location was very good in kind of giving us a little spot in the cafe or the place, and we could have those private conversations, and it works out well. It's just to show that we're out and about during the summer. I'm not on holidays, until October. So, yeah.
It because you're supporting local business. Like I
Hmm.
really, like I don't think a lot of people got that. It's like you're actually in their shops. You know what I mean? You're
Right.
using their wares and enjoying their company. And it also is an opportunity to have just that, a coffee conversation, isn't it? Which I don't
That's
think we
right.
do enough of anymore.
Yeah, it's more relaxed, and it does. It supports local business. So, Coco Cabana, I love their egg salad sandwiches. So, I took one of those to go after we were done our morning meetings. There was coffee purchased. Everywhere we went, obviously, we support the business that we're at. I wish I could, buy everyone in the place food or whatever, and to help them out. But we know that we're in tough economic times. And I think, now more than ever, it's very important to go out into our community and support when we can. So that was also another deciding factor on where we went. We could go to a library, we could rent a county facility, but at the same time, that doesn't help local businesses, right? So I made the executive decision that we were not renting libraries, and so as a result, those people who said, "Well, I don't really want to talk about my issue," okay, that's fine. Um, but this is the decision we made, and largely, you're right. The reason I made that decision was because I think it's important to support our small business owners.
Was the diversity of questioning unique to each town? Like, was there
Nah,
any?
a lot of them, well, it's unique in the sense that everybody has their thing, right? So, um, it's usually a very kind of isolated situation that they need help with.
Okay.
Property issues that are largely municipal, but I would give them advice on how to kind of wade through that and then make the connections with their local counselors. We had daycare issues. This $10 a day daycare in Seawelk is not working out well. So that was one of the meetings. And then just a lot of personal issues.
Did you get the feeling folks in Hull and Norfolk are struggling? Did you get that perception talking to them?
I've been witnessing this over the past few years, actually. I mean, I worked for Toby for 23 and a half years, and I could kind of see the ebbs and flows, but I'd be hard pressed to find a time when I felt like people were at a worse time than they are now. We're in bad ways. People are struggling, and I don't believe that it is an income problem. It's an outcome problem that we cannot control. We are paying more and more for the necessities of life that we cannot control. We are embarking upon fall, and then we will be into winter. We need heat in this country, and we can't control Mother Nature. We can't control the price of our bill. Yeah, sure, we can turn the furnace, up and down as we feel fit, but at some point, we still need to pay for that, and it's not a luxury; it's a necessity. And so those necessities continue to rise. Property taxes continue to rise. Like, I cannot believe how much my property taxes have risen since I moved in here, 7, 8 years ago.
And I think I want to just finish up with that, because I think those roundtable conversations you're having coffee with people, it's a different type of conversation where everybody in a social environment, there's checks and balances, and they can have a discussion. I think everybody can share their opinion and still walk away with some pride in their opinion, but share it, right? And I think that's a totally different animal than we're seeing what's going on social media today, on other forums. Getting together and sitting down with someone and having a conversation, to me, is where it all starts. Not this social media crap where you're blowing people up. And you see it to all the politicians at every level right now. And it's kind of disturbing, to be honest with you. I appreciate that you actually went out, sat down, had the conversation face to face with people. Kudos to you for doing that. I appreciate that.
And you're right. It's extremely disturbing what we see play out on social media. And I find it ironic that those folks who claim, oh, Bobbi Ann Brady, you never talk to her. And I'll go online and I'll say, listen, I'll buy your coffee. Come meet me. I'm the person who pretty much has coffee with anybody and everybody who asks. So, you're beaking off on social media, and you're making assumptions about me. You've never met me. And there's one gentleman, I think it's from Caledonia, and I've offered to buy him coffee, I bet you 20 times. He never takes me up on the offer. That's because he's just decided in his mind it's easier and it's more fun for him to actually just go out on social media and, be the person he is.
It's sad. That's too bad. I do want to switch gears and talk about your August 5th article on your column on will the province choose power over 40,000 people? ? I thought that when I read it, there was a couple of thoughts I had. I had heard before I saw your column about the possibility of nuclear or gas at Nanticoke, possible upstart of that station again. And I was like, wait, didn't they want to put 40,000 people there? And I was confused by it. Can you walk me through these two different pieces of government, why they're not talking, and what is this all about?
Yeah, so of course we just finished this summer, the spring, whatever you want to call it, the environmental registry posting for the ministerial zoning order. And I'm just, a lot of people see those signs MZO and they don't know what that means. That means that in order to change the kind of the land use of that particular parcel, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing would have to say, okay, we're going to allow this to transpire. So they put the posting up the day after the House rose in June. Ironically, the day they posted it was the day that I would have had my last question before summer break. So we rose early, 2 days early, and they decided that they would post the environmental registry the day after we rose. That's very, very purposeful. Anyhow, I think it was 30 days. I think the comment period ended July 4th. So people had an opportunity to go and comment as to whether or not a city of 40,000 is a good idea. And I would suspect that the overwhelming evidence points to the fact that the people of Haldimand, Norfolk, and likely people across the province in other parts of Ontario probably waded in on this and said, no, you know what? You can't put people in an industrial park, in and around an industrial park, for a number of reasons. So you have that proposal. And then you have the Minister of Energy who shows up a few weeks ago and says, hey, OPG is committed, $500,000 to look at an energy project here in Haldeman County at Anicoke. And that's great. Actually, I've spent the past 4 years along with Mayor Shelley Ann Bentley pressing the Minister of Energy and saying, look, you know what, the infrastructure already exists, right, at the old OPG site. And they would love to resurrect something there. The province also needs something like 75% more power by 2050. And if we don't get that power, we're in trouble in this province. And so why wouldn't the Minister of Energy go to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing and say, look, you know what, you can't entertain this MZO. You can't entertain a city of 40,000 at an industrial park when we need Ontario's top industrial park to be a site for an energy project so we can meet the demands by 2050. You can't put up an energy project overnight, Dave, right? This requires very careful planning no matter what energy project you're going to put in there. This is years away. So I have pressed the Minister of Energy privately. I go across the floor in the Ontario legislature, and I have said to him, and Mayor Bentley and I have also met with him at AMO and Roma in the past, and we have said, look, you know what? You have got to have this discussion with the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing and tell him, look, you know what? The people of Haldimand County and, you know, not our council here in Norfolk, but the people of Norfolk County also believe that good paying jobs is what we need out there, not 40,000 people who are going to suck our infrastructure and our services and really not give much back to the economy. So we have gone to the minister numerous times, and his answer is always the same. I am not going to get involved, and I am not going to have an opinion on the MZO. Why wouldn't you? You are the minister who needs 75% more power by 2050, and you've got your gold mine sitting here at the Anicoke Industrial Park. So it's a very interesting situation. And all I can hope for, Dave, is that, you know, even though the Minister of Energy is saying that, hopefully he really is having those conversations with the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And he's saying, look, you know what, you can't approve this. You know, if I'm looking at the glass half full, maybe the government said to, you know, Empire Communities, they said, okay, you know what, we'll put this on the environmental registry. And, you know, there is no requirement for the minister to actually make a decision on that application. So now that it's come off the environmental registry, people say to me, how long before the minister makes a decision? Well, the minister can sit on it indefinitely. He doesn't have to make a decision. So, you know, looking at the glass half full, you know, I'm hoping that the minister just kind of says, look, you know what, we ran this on the environmental registry. Overwhelming, you know, feedback was that we don't want a city of 40,000. We don't want 10,000 homes at the Anicoke Industrial Park, and we're going to go with an energy project. That's me looking at the glass half full.
Why wouldn't the Minister for Energy not realize that he needed to say something there? Like, that doesn't make any sense. If it's already, that property is already, you know, looked at as being set for energy development, why, like, that didn't make any sense to me that he wouldn't, because it's like, it doesn't, like, and is this just a token? Are they just saying, well, they've got 3 different sites, correct? I think they're looking at now.
Yeah, they are.
Are we just the token to make sure to keep everybody happy here and say, look, it didn't get, you know, like,
I don't know. I don't know if they're going to use it as like which way they're going to go on this. If they're using one against the other, I have no clue. But here we have OPG investing, you know, a significant amount of money into researching this. And so, like, I would hope that OPG is not being strung along. I mean, $500,000, you know, it's a lot of money to you and I guess, you know, maybe to OPG that it's, you know, it's, I'm sure they see it as significant as well, but it's not a whole heck of a lot of money, but it's still a commitment from OPG to look at that site. And I would hope that the ministry is not stringing them along, but the whole thing was very strange, in my opinion. Like, you have a minister who shows up to do an announcement on an energy project, which I'm going to, you know, that is that's very positive. But there were a bunch of things about the announcement that just didn't make sense to a whole lot of people. First of all, you're not saying that, you know, you're you're pressing the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing to make the proper decision. You have some representatives from a council and from a county that have never spoken out against the MZO, all of a sudden there for the photo op. You have a Chamber of Commerce at the microphone from a completely different county that has never spoken out against 40,000 people there, who has never said we support an energy project. Like, the whole thing, it's a great announcement from like, with respect to OPG committing the money and saying, hey, look, you know what, we want to do something here to help with the province's energy issue. That's the positive part. But I think the ball was dropped on a number of fronts as to actually, what are you guys doing with this? Because some of the things that transpired just didn't make sense, and they continue to not make sense. So I'm trying to see the glass half full, but my goodness, with this government, it's I've seen the bait and switch before.
And plus, you've got a steel plant, you've got Esso there. Like, you'd think they would be in for it too, wanting to see that growth with that plant. There's so many small businesses that I'm thinking of, like Charles Jones in that area, that would totally benefit. Like, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like, it'd be a win-win. And how many, when OPG was up, was it like 1,000 employees, 1,200, I want to say?
I think it was 1,200, yeah.
So think about that right there.
And that's what we need. This area needs those good paying careers. And this is why I've been so frustrated with Norfolk County Council, because a lot of the men and women who work out in the industrial park, even though the industrial park is in Haldimand County, many of those people live in Norfolk County. So why aren't we working to save those good paying jobs? And I remember, listen, I was endorsed by the steelworkers in last year's election. And you know why they endorsed me? Because they said, we know your opponent can't save us from Trump's tariffs, despite what she's saying. We are going to go with the person who's going to save us from 40,000 people, because 40,000 people is going to change the way we do business, and we may not be here.
There you go. It's an interesting plot that we're going to have to watch develop and see where it goes with this, because there's so many questions still unanswered. And actually throwing in the energy part of it makes it even more cloudy. Like, you're just not sure what the government's thinking right now on the provincial side.
And quite honestly, if I was the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, I sure as heck would not rubber stamp an MZO on 40,000 people's, going to Nanticoke when we're still waiting on an RCMP investigation into the Greenbelt scandal. I mean, this is just an extension of such a scandal. And I maintain that if you put that number of people in the industrial park, it's an Aaron Brockovich movie.
Oh, there you go.
Never
thought about that. Yeah.
I do not believe that an industrial park, for a number of reasons, is a good place for people, whether it's 10,000, 20,000. And people say, you know what, Bobbi, and we'll never see 40,000 people there. Well, ask people in Caledonia how quickly Caledonia grew. We are in a different time. And people talk about, constituents say, well, Townsend never happened. No, Townsend is Ontario's biggest development failure. But Townsend was at a different time. We are in a different economic environment. We are in a different population environment. There's a lot of folks from the Greater Hamilton area, Greater Toronto area, who would see that the Nanticoke Industrial Park offers for them cheaper living. And they would go and they would lay their head there, and they would commute to their job and commute to their regular life in the Greater Hamilton and Greater Toronto area. And I am very, very convinced by that, by what I see elsewhere and in other communities in the surrounding area. And I think it's I maintain it's the most harebrained idea that we've ever had. We have to grow. We have to develop, but it's got to be responsible. Doubling Haldimand County's population is not responsible. And I would challenge those folks who say, oh, it'll never happen in 40 years. Look at the north side of Caledonia.
Growth continues. Let's switch gears. I want to talk about your August 10th piece. Flooding just isn't about rain, it's about our choices. Can you give us an overview on that one?
Yeah, so, it's no secret to those out there that, I'm in favor of preserving and protecting our most productive lands. in this province for food production. But recent flooding events also show that pavement doesn't absorb water. And once we pave over, you know, fields and we make less space for water to be absorbed on our land, water has nowhere to go. And if we do not have the monies to update infrastructure, water and wastewater infrastructure, and drainage infrastructure, what we see in the past while shows us what we're going to get. We're going to get flooding, and we're not immune from 100-year flood, right? And what would happen if we had those types of situations, a real catastrophic event, and we have paved over everything? Our soil, good sandy soil, acts as a natural sponge. And, you can go from Norfolk County to Haldimand County. The old saying is that we're separated by soil types between the two counties. And you can get a rain, like if we had a rain last night and that dumped, inch and a half of water on our land here in Norfolk this morning, that land would look much different than it would in parts of Haldimand County where, it's clay. And so, but even that Haldimand County land is very important. You can't pave over that because it still acts as a buffer, right, to flooding. So I maintain that when we pave over things, when we pave over land, and we don't have the money to update drainage, we've got problems. And that's what you're seeing lately.
Yeah. The other part of this too is, from my perspective, is the wetlands that we're losing.
Mm-hmm.
We got to have those. And Doug Ford has sort of taken it upon himself, it seems, knowing the people I know that are in that industry, and they're just shaking their heads because you start losing all that, you're losing more than just farmland. You know what I mean? Like it's an erosion that way of all that we need for our land to, reproduce itself over and over again. And wetlands are a vital part of that. And we keep, like you said, paving them over, trying to find different drainage ways, but you have a natural resource there. You don't need to be, doing that to that umpteenth degree all over the province. And I do agree with you. One of the things that you told me years ago that caught me and has stuck with me is just that strip of land along the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence that is our agricultural land. That doesn't exist everywhere, folks. Like you go north, it's rock. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think we even actually understand what that is. And when I read your piece on this and just about the flooding and how we're going to be able to deal with it, you're right. You're totally right.
There's nothing wrong with wide open space and soil in green space. We need that. Our forefathers understood that. And I think they, one of the things that we know that money drives everything in this day and age. And I'm afraid that money and greed and the desire to just, sell houses, build houses and sell them and fill them and continue to bring people to Canada, and mostly they large land in Ontario. I feel that we need to look at that model a little differently. We need to get people back to work here. Canadians who are able to work, we need to get them back to work. This idea that we need to continue to bring people to work. Maybe our stores aren't open 7 days a week. Maybe until we kind of get caught up with our infrastructure, maybe our stores are only open 5 or 6 days a week. Maybe we take that traditional Sunday off like we used to, and give people a break and just get people back to work. And we need to simplify a little bit. I don't know, but this idea to continue to bring people, continue to slam up houses, pave over our land, what we're leaving for the next generations, I'm a bit frightened by it.
It's funny because the last podcast I just did, one of the person I was talking to, we talked about sustainable food sources and how, that is one thing as kids that we grew up in Norfolk County, there was always fresh always fresh food, apples, name it, you name it, it was there. You always had it. It was readily available, and that doesn't seem to be. It's still there. Don't get me wrong, but it's not. It's not what you and I probably remember is how ready, available, and how cheap and easy it was to get that and to feed your family. I think
Yeah.
there's just a different era coming through now that things are changing, and I agree with you. We got to protect what we got because if we
Yeah.
don't, what are we going to do down the road?
It's funny. There's some very small group of farmers who say to me in Norfolk County, "Oh, we've got enough land. We grow enough food." Well, that's fine, but why wouldn't we want to preserve that? Why would we want to put that in jeopardy with poor decision making? Um, I get that we have that, but why wouldn't we want to set ourselves up as being able to produce and ship food to more places? I mean, the more other jurisdictions pave over productive land, the more we could produce to actually feed them. That means money for our farmers. That means, you know, economic benefits to this region. Why would we want to position ourselves the same as them by paving over everything and making ourselves at some point reliant on another jurisdiction to produce for us? Because when you make yourself reliant on another jurisdiction, you're paying through the nose.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's kind of important too that we, like you said, well, we have this opportunity to sort of build a plan, both on the energy front, which would be huge, and on the agricultural front. I mean, that and tourism, those three things for this area have been around since the early 1970s as far as the energy sector goes, when OPG did come here originally. So I think there's opportunity to sort of recreate a new viable Haldimand Norfolk for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, I don't really want to talk about the municipal election because
Oh yeah, that's
taking
coming
up a
up
lot of
too.
my brain space these days. But I would say to the people of Haldimand, Norfolk, look well to your vote. That's an old saying. But in this situation, I think we really need to choose candidates who have a hard line on what responsible development, responsible growth looks like. Again, I will say to all of those out there who love to paint me as the anti-development MPP. I'm not anti-development, but I am anti-irresponsible development. And so I say to those who are going to cast their ballots on October 26th, please go to the ballot box knowing which candidates understand what responsible growth looks like. Please look at your current incumbents, the people who have been sitting around the table the past few years, past 4 years. Please look at what they have done, what their voting record looks like when it comes to approving development projects.
I agree.
That's my warning, and it may take a bit of work. If anyone has any questions about some of those things, and you want to reach out to me, I'm all ears, and I will help you wade through that. Because if you haven't been following along, it might be difficult to figure out. But there have been decisions made, and hey, listen, around our own, I live in Norfolk County. I have heard around the council table before, oh, it's just formality. We passed that because it's formality. Sometimes I'd argue.
I think too, this is a great opportunity to remind people to educate themselves with each individual that's running in their area for council or mayor and ask those questions. Most of these folks are available. You can send them an email, a text, and ask them what their policies are. So you understand going in. And I think we're going to have a big turnout this year. I think the November election is going to be a lot of folks are going to get out and vote. And I think that's important too, to say what to vote who you think's got your interest at hand for the community at large.
Yep, absolutely. I just, we always say this. We always say this election's important. Every election is important, everyone. But Dave, when I look around, when I see what is happening in our small communities, when I travel this province, when I go to Queen's Park and I see some of the decision making that is occurring, I am extremely frustrated and I'm extremely worried. And we have long taken for granted in this country that people sitting around tables, government, policymakers, the media, the people who we have long thought were looking after us, I don't think they've been looking after us. I think they've been looking after special interest. I think they've been looking after themselves. And we really need to wake up and we need to pay attention.
Yeah, there's so many, there's a lot of other topics I wanted to get into today, but it's already been our half hours up. But I did want to touch base on one last thing on homelessness, because I did see some information out there that I didn't really understand. It was somebody in it looked like a crossing guard uniform with a walkie-talkie going through a park. Like, what are we doing here? Like, if people are homeless, we all gotta help. And just reporting them, I don't know what good that's going to do. So I wondered too, down the road, in the fall, I hope that the government can sort of look at where this is going, because again, with the constant rising in prices, with folks not being able to afford stuff, this is just going to grow. This is going to get a lot worse. And
It's
I think
going to
it's
get way
time.
worse.
Yeah.
And I want to know what's happened with the money. So a few years ago, before we actually saw the homelessness issue kind of, blowing out of control, governments were upper levels of government were committing monies to our municipalities. What happened to those monies? I asked that question during last year's provincial debate in Simcoe. What happened to somewhere between $2 and $6 million for homelessness in Norfolk County? Because at that time, those monies, and anywhere between 2 and 6, should have actually cured the problem. I think part of the issue is the monies are not being put in the hands of people who actually know how to get results. Government is handing out money and we are not testing for positive outcomes. That is a huge problem. You can't keep committing money and no positive outcomes. And I actually said this to a group that meets with us that is set up with representatives from a bunch of municipalities here in southwestern Ontario. And they met with me. It was either AMO or Roma a few years ago, and they asked me if I would commit to supporting their ask for, I can't remember the program, Dave. I can't remember the program name, but they asked if I would commit to supporting them in their ask, and it was for homelessness and addictions. And my exact words to them, and this was either in 2022 or 2023, was I will commit to supporting you for these funds in this fiscal year. But if you continue to come to me year after year asking me for these same funds and I don't see any improvement, I'm going to have to take a different stance. And
Fair enough.
Here we are. We just continue to throw money after money with no positive outcomes. And this is a problem for me. There's been a lot of money pledged for these problems. The issue is the province does not take any responsibility for how those funds are spent. They're not testing for those positive outcomes that we need. And I know that this might be controversial to some, but we saw a lot of this homelessness and homelessness and addictions can be blurred together in some cases, and they can also be very separate issues depending on the individual. But we did not see these types of problems when we actually had, and I'm going to use the word institutions, when we had facilities where people could go to get help with these things. And look, we've come a long way over the years. We now know better ways of helping people with addictions. We know how to provide wraparound supports for people who are homeless. But a lot of times we're not reaching them because we don't have the manpower to go out on the streets and say, hey, look, you know what? Let me bring you here. I honestly believe that we have to bring back some sort of institution where we can say to folks, hey, look, you know what? In the moment where we're going to take you, we're going to take you to this facility. We're going to provide you with rehabilitation services. We're going to provide you with wraparound services to make you a productive human being again. The majority of people want to be productive. Nobody wants to be hanging around on the street doing drugs, right? The majority of people want to be productive, but they don't know how to do that. And we need to do better. We need to find a more efficient way of reaching those people.
I think I'm surprised there really has never been in my lifetime that I have seen a national or a provincial plan for homelessness. I haven't seen anything that's been strategic enough to actually use countrywide. The other part used a couple terms I used addiction, and the other one I would say before that is mental health. That is probably
Absolutely.
the start of all these addiction issues. And I'm not sure, I can't go with you on the institute thing, but I can go with the idea of providing a service where they have a place to sleep to start. Because I think most people, if you give them something, like you said, a place to rest their head and a reason to get up the next day and do something positive with their life, I think they'll find that way to turn themselves around with your help for sure. But I don't think we can do the institution thing. I think that just went down the wrong hole, in my opinion,
We
all the
know,
way around.
but we know more. We know the flaws with the institutions. We know what went wrong. The problem as a policymaker, as somebody who sits and has listened to at least over the past four years, to at least probably 70 groups of people who have come to me saying, I know how to fix this. How do I, as a policymaker, choose winners and losers when it comes to who's actually going to get the money to help people? That is part of the problem. There are a lot of fingers in the stew. I have organizations who come to me and they say, I know how to fix this. Okay, are you working with so and so? No, I don't like their approach. That is tough for me. How do I say, oh, yeah, I'm going to pick you over them, because then now they're going to be mad and now they're not getting funding and they're going to be ticked off because they're not getting funding. This is part of the problem, is without testing for those positive outcomes, without like really nailing down who we're giving money to in the community, there are a lot of fingers in the stew. And I think everybody has good intentions, Dave, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
And I think too, my opinion on that is, you have an organization similar to like the CMHA that I did a lot of stuff with, and I see how short-staffed they are. They can't even begin to get to the folks that need the help. And I think that's another issue where we're seeing we just don't have the people trained in the proper fields to address these issues. They are literally, they're doing so much group work anymore because they don't have the facilitators on staff to reach out to those individuals and help them. And I think that's probably, if I was going to sink money, I'd be putting my money into the people to help actually help those people, because I think that's where we need to get a better handle on it. And it is growing at an epidemic rate,
Yes.
pandemic rate. So it's
Listen,
crazy.
it didn't happen overnight. It
No,
did not. People believe that this happened overnight. It did not. And I go all the way back
sure,
to
I agree.
1999 when I started working in government in 99. And I remember Mike Harris, love him or hate him, folks. One of the things that Mike Harris asked for from every MPP's office was a report. And I think it was around Christmas time that he asked for this. And he would say, what are you seeing on the ground? That is so important. Instead of asking people sitting in towers downtown Toronto, what are you seeing in Norfolk County? What are you seeing in Haldimand County? We would write a report to Mike Harris. And I remember in my first year of work with Toby, Dave, my input into that report was I could not believe the number of people who were coming into our office with mental health issues.
Yeah.
That number paled in comparison to what we see today. That was nothing. Yeah. And yet that struck a chord with me in my first year of work. And now, man, I wish we could go back to 1999 and have only the amount of issues that I saw then compared to today. We have just gone down a very slippery slope.
Well, maybe that's like you said, maybe that's where you need to have that master plan, and you need to have those organizations that are leading the way and develop something that's a 25-year plan out. You know what I mean? Because I think that's the only way we're going to get a handle on this, is start looking at how, like you said, in your solution and my solution aren't that far apart. But I mean, we've got to find a way that we can address it upfront, because it's our next generations, man. They're struggling. And this is, I don't know. I don't want to say it's up to you and I, because, like everyone's life, we've had our own struggles to deal with. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't know how they're going to do it. Like, I really don't know.
I am very passionate on the mental health file. I've
Yeah,
had,
and well, I saw on your website too. You
yeah,
guys did some stuff.
my June post about Men's Mental
Yeah,
Health Awareness Month. I was so, um, in some senses, I was so pleased that so many people came to that post. It was the most overwhelming post I think I've ever had since being elected, in the sense that there were people, men, who came to that post
yeah.
and commented and were vulnerable and said, hey, look, you know what, I'm so and so, and you would recognize them as being a person in the community that is very successful and upstanding and everything else, and there they are admitting that they have struggles too. That is a huge step. But it's also so sad to see so many people who are struggling, and not everybody has the tools or the resources. And one of the things that really confuses me on this file is, we talk about awareness. We are aware. We are aware that these mental health issues exist. We are aware that people are struggling. There's a disconnect between the awareness and what we're doing. That is the problem. I had a friend whose son committed suicide this spring. She says to me, Bobbi, and I didn't know I needed to open the toolbox. How do you know when to open the toolbox, right? From a personal perspective, how do you know, or what do you do when someone you recognize is struggling and you're offering love, you're offering help, but they keep pushing you away? What do you do? That disconnect exists.
That's where we need the experts for sure.
I
This
I'm very
great
passionate
conversation
about
today.
that.
Yeah, me too. And it's one of the things that I see is, I agree with you 100% on that. It's
Listen,
something that
one
drives.
one last thing. Was it three friend like officers last week committed suicide in this
Yeah.
province?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I didn't follow that, but yeah, I did hear something about it. But
I
yeah,
think there was a Hamilton police officer, an OPP, and an RCMP, I believe. Don't quote me, but I think there were
yeah.
three. And we've got a problem in our policing world with mental health as well. And our white shirts in policing need to recognize that something's very wrong. And if I were to guess, it's not always because of what they're dealing with on the street. I believe there are systemic issues within our policing community that are causing a lot of grief and sadness for our officers, and we have to get to the bottom of that.
One of the ones too, a program a few years ago that we did a follow up on was about suicides in farming and farm owners. And I did not realize the numbers were so high. I didn't realize, but when you started to look at that, very independent people work on their own, and if things aren't going well, you know what I mean? They're not sharing. They weren't sharing anyway. But I just
Kudos
thought that was another area that we need to, it's all around us, right? The mental
Kudos
health
to
issues.
a lot of the farm organizations. I think at
Yeah.
the grain farmers come top of mind. OFA comes top of mind. They have set up hotlines. They are working diligently on this. And one of the things, when it comes to men, for example, and I'm not being sexist in any way here. I'm not meaning to be sexist in any way, but men have traditionally been taught to keep their feelings to themselves. You don't cry. You don't show any signs of weakness. um, it's not weakness to ask for help. But we have kind of trained males from a young age to you have to be the strong one, and I get that I get that a male wants to be strong, but there are different ways to be strong. And yeah, anyway, it's something I'm very passionate about. I'm working on some things with respect to mental illness, all encompassing, because I spoke at Flora's Walk earlier this spring, perinatal mental health. And my goodness, I wasn't very hopeful to those girls, because I said, like, one of the things that's a problem is that you move from, childbearing years to now periomenopause and menopause.
I think to wrap this up, I want to, you know, say that we started out talking about politics and then we ended
Mm-hmm.
up talking about lives.
Yeah.
And the whole show just showed the priorities of where we really need to get to, right? Like, I mean, politics are always going to be there. What was somebody struggling mental health issues?
Yeah.
Help them. Just help them, right?
Yep,
So I think that's it's a great show. Thanks for doing this. A lot of stuff we covered today, and we'll talk soon. We'll talk next month when you're getting ready to go back to the house.
You
Okay.
bet. I look forward to it, Dave.